much. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Okay, I'm done. Yeah, so I was watching a TED Talk the other day, and they said, if you want to give a presentation, you can pause for like 10 seconds, and then you get everybody's attention. And if people were on their phone or they were on their laptops, then they would pause to wait and see what that's about. Did it work? Yes. Okay. All right. So today, I want to talk about writing documentations that don't suck. Has anyone here used any documentation before? You have? Have you written a documentation before? Okay. Yeah, I'm coming for you. All right, so last year at the last InfoBeep Shift conference in Zadar, one of my friends, Tejas Kumar, he talked about writing documentations for humans. And it really struck me, right? From the first time that I started working professionally, I've been writing documentations. And he said a lot of things that kind of like struck me. I felt like, well, he's calling me out in some way, but he doesn't know. And I started thinking about it and started thinking about the things that I found really frustrating about documentations. And since then, I've been writing and talking about documentations, basically. And today, because of all the things that I've found out now and all of the bad experiences I've had with documentations, I also want to talk about that today. So shout out to him for inspiring this talk as well. Before I get started, I want to make some ground rules. I usually do this. So you just have to go along with me, right? I was on a 16-hour flight from Dubai to get here. So if I say anything that is a little bit out of place, I expect you to nod and just agree with me. Does that make sense? Okay, you're not allowed to make my job any harder than it is. All right, the second one is, please do not sleep. Yesterday, while we were at dinner, Alexa, who was just speaking before me, she said, Kenny, when is your talk? I said, 2:30 p.m., immediately after yours. And she said, is that before or after lunch? I said, after lunch. She said, oh my God, are you not worried that people could sleep off? I'm like, will they? I don't know, should I be worried? And she's like, we'll find out. Then today, as I was heading down to get lunch, and then somebody walks up to me. I think he's probably there. And he's like, when is your session? Have you already given the talk? I said, no, not yet. He said, oh, it's after lunch? I said, yes. People are going to sleep. Are you not worried? Is there something about lunch and sleep in Miami that no one's telling me about? All right. And the last one, please tell my boss that I was here. Immediately I landed, I went to the South Miami Beach, and I posted a picture. And I don't want to give the impression that I came here to have fun. Just at any time, take a picture, post on Twitter. My handle is @Kenny_IO. Let people know that I actually did my job. All right. Yeah, my name is Kenny. I'm the director of DevRel at Collabland. Collabland is a Web3 company. It's a DAO infrastructure tool that allows you to manage access into different kinds of exclusive communities. But I'm not here to talk about Web3 today. That's just where I work. And I want to also talk about something that I do on the side, which is DX Mentorship Program. It's where I help people like yourselves who are full-time engineers who would like to transition to dev advocacy. I help mentor in that group for a period of 3 months. Now I want to get into it. Before we start talking about documentations that are good, I want to talk about the ones that actually are bad, right? If you've ever had an encounter with a bad documentation, can I see your hands up? Right, okay. Yeah, I like that. So you can all agree with me that they are usually slow. Bad documentations are not just slow, but they are slow and they are very complicated to use. They have a lot of technical jargons, and we'll get into all of that. I don't want to spend so much time on it. I think we all pretty much know what is wrong with documentations these days. But I just wanted to add it and call it out. As we progress in the talk, I'm going to kind of like give you instances on how to make more sense of this. So what I want to do is take all of those things that are bad and then see if we can reverse engineer it. And that would hopefully usher us into something that is a documentation that don't suck. And I hope I can use the word suck because I have it right there in my title. It will be hard not to use it. All right, so good documentations are fast. They are clear and concise. They are evergreen, so they never go out of date. They are complete and accurate. They are well-structured and easy to navigate. They are accessible. They have examples and use cases for easy implementation for developers like us. And then they have a vibrant community, and they provide helpful feedback. And then the process of going from a bad documentation to a good one. I want to start from the first point that we had before. Make them fast, right? If you've ever gone to a documentation site, it could be, I don't want to name names, but if you've gone to any site and click a button and then you get a loading spinner, just delays you for a couple of seconds. That's not a good experience, right? Nobody likes that. So there are two ways that I would suggest if anyone wants to do this, they can follow is, first, you can consider the tooling and the architecture side of it, right? How many of us here know about the Jamstack? Awesome. All right, so it's something that I think got popular for things like documentations, sites that are purely presentational, that you can pre-build your entire content. During build time, you generate all the assets, you generate all the content, you've got everything you want, you get it ready, deploy it on the CDN so it's readily available even before your users get there. Why I'm putting this out here is I'm a big Jamstack fan, even though I'm in Web3 now, but that is something that I think frameworks like Gatsby, Next.js, SSG, Docusarus, and a couple of other frameworks have helped do. So if you're using frameworks that don't support static site generation, or actually that allows you to pre-render content that you don't necessarily need to load dynamically, then use that, because it will evidently make your site faster. And then the second part of the puzzle is content, right? One of the things that slows sites down the most is the media assets that we have on it. If you have a lot of images or a lot of videos, or your fonts are loaded the wrong way and they are taking a lot of time for your pages to render, that will definitely be a huge drop point, and it will make your site go slower. And the next thing is clarity and conciseness, and this is the one that I had at the back of my mind as I was preparing this talk. One time I went to, I was Googling, I think I was trying to find out about array destructuring, and I saw this definition. Yeah, you can read it, right? Okay, so it is technically correct, right? But it's not very helpful to me, is it? Now, this is exactly the same as this one. Now, which one is more helpful to you? Right, so the other one is, and this is an opinion that I have, people that write documentations are very smart, right? The only problem is sometimes they tend to think that the rest of us are just as smart. So they use a lot of technical jargons, and they write things the way it is in their head, and it doesn't make as much sense to the rest of us. So I would prefer a documentation being very clear, very concise, being very small, so that you can read a sentence and just get the point without having to do more Googling or more Stack Overflow searches when you're reading someone else's documentation. And I have another example, and this one I saw very recently, right? Because I was recommending, I'm mentoring a couple of people, and I'm talking them through JavaScript, and I said, JavaScript mapping, read it up. And then they sent me this whole thing about how it involves applications, the higher order function, map, blah, 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 blah. I didn't even get it. I felt like, okay, wait, what are we talking about? Is it the same thing? Because it was too verbose. And then I sent them a different one. And this one was simpler, it was clearer, it was easier to understand, because it didn't have all the unnecessary fancy words that they used. So this is what I would consider to be an improvement into the last one that we had before. So this is clearer, this is concise, and it makes it easy for people to understand. Now, I want to talk about keeping your documentation evergreen, right? Something that I've had to deal with is copy a code from a documentation site, put it in my VS Code, try to run it, and then it doesn't work. And then you wonder why that is. It has gone out of date, or maybe you're just accessing the wrong document. This is something that I struggled with in the past. So I had to kind of I'm going to take you on a journey on how I try to solve this. So the technology was advancing really quickly, and that is the case in very early stage startups. If you're working there, you see that the pace of product development usually is faster than that of documentation, because I think for every 11 engineers, there's one technical writer, right? And then there's just not enough time for you to catch up with the pace of the development. So what I did is I recommended something to the product team. So this is a typical, and this is for example purposes, this is like a typical product development lifecycle, right? It goes from ideation to you get the PRD ready, it goes through staging, development, in progress, blah, 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 until it goes to production. And then I went to the product manager and I said, what if we added documentation somewhere between staging and QA, so that would be a way for us to make sure that for every feature, for every product that's coming out, we have documentation done so that it never goes out of date. Yeah, I thought that was very smart, and it seemed really smart. Because it made sense to me. I'm like, if we do that, it means we would have documentation before anything goes live. And then he said, well, your priorities are different from mine. I want to ship product as quickly as possible, and all you're doing is you're adding a friction point for me before I go live. So no, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, okay, I was bummed. But I was determined to make sure that our documentations are up to date, and I think there were just 2 or 3 people in my team, and we just couldn't keep up with the pace of the product. So I said, what if we did it in parallel? At the time where we are preparing the product requirement documents, we're also developing the documentation. And this would mean that we would then follow what I call the documentation-driven development. Has anyone heard about that before? DDD? Yeah. So that kind of like means the product development is happening alongside the documentation, and that way it all kind of like moves from the production to in progress to staging to QA. It all moves along. And this is what we started doing, right? So whenever we start talking about a new feature or a new product, we start speccing it out, then we start documenting it, and sometimes both can inform the other. The documentation can inform the direction of the product, and vice versa. So that worked out for us, and maybe if you're struggling with rapid advancements in your products, that could be something to consider. Lastly, completeness and accuracy. Now, this is something that happens, I think, probably very often to everyone here. If you've ever gone to a site and you copy like a call URL, like the one that I've got on screen, and I think earlier Joyce talked about Postman. I use Postman a lot. So usually I would copy this URL, I'll put it in my Postman, and there, I get a 403, or 402, or a 401, or a 400. Something like it's working on the documentation, right? You see the 200 response, but you try to use it, and then you get errors. Now, it's inaccurate because they should have told me that I need an API key to hit that endpoint, or that I need to get some kind of access token. I need to, like, all that information should exist. If you give me a code snippet, or if I'm using any documentation site, and I see a code snippet, intuitively, I would think if I just paste it, it would work, because that's why you put it there. And then you put it and it doesn't work. So this is, in my experience, this is something that is bad about documentations, and this leads to like confusions, and it makes life difficult for developers using your docs. Now, I have another experience, and this is for incomplete docs. I was using, and I'm not going to call the names, but I was following a documentation. It says how to add custom domains to the project, to the site that I had deployed on the platform. Right? How to add custom domains. When you deploy to AWS or Heroku or Vercel or Netlify or wherever, they give you like a default URL. That is weird. But if you wanted to add your own URL, your own custom domain, like kenny.engineer or something, then they have a documentation for how you do that. So I was trying to follow the documentation, and I did. I was able to deploy. I was able to add the domains. But you know when you finish adding a custom domain, and you can see that your domain is working, but the lock icon is not there, so your site is not secure. There's no way, you haven't provisioned an SSL certificate yet, so your site is not secure. Now, would it be wrong of me to expect that I should have the documentation of how to do that while I'm adding up my custom domain? Because I want to be able to finish that process and be done with it. So, but this was not the case. I had to finish adding the custom domain, and I had to message the support team. And this took me 2 days, actually. You would think that this would come easy in 2023. But I had to message the support team, went back and forth in Slack, created a ticket. And all I was trying to do was really what? Just how do I add an SSL certificate to my domain? Yeah, so it was very incomplete. If I wasn't someone who was patient enough to go through that process, that was a potential dropping point for me to stop using that process and deploy at a separate provider. Feedback, collaboration, and what? Yeah, everyone likes that. So feedback is an important part of documentation because if you struggle, you want to be able to tell them that you're struggling, especially if you're passionate about the product you're using or if you like it, or if you want to continue using it, you want to be able to tell them, hey, this thing is not working, what do I do now? And funny enough, a lot of documentations don't allow you to do that. Like, there's no way for you to feedback. You have to either go into the company Slack channel or you need to open a ticket or something. Opening tickets and making GitHub issues are fine, but if I can do that right from the documentation, then I would prefer that. And that is one of my favorite contributions to the Netlify documentation is we added this way of letting people, thumbs up or thumbs down per page. So if you come to a particular page and you're trying to do something, the document is walking you through a process. At the end of that process, you're not sleeping, right? Okay. At the end of that process, you want to be sure that your needs were met or whatever information you're looking for was provided. If it wasn't, then we want to know what was wrong, and then we can fix it, right? You don't see that in a lot of documentations, and that is like a very key user experience-friendly thing to add for someone. There's collaboration, and this is the one that is very popular, right? Almost every documentation you see today will give you a button, edit this page, right? But how many times have you edited the page and eventually seen your edits come live? It almost never happens, right? But okay, it has happened for you. Once, yeah. It has happened for me as well, right? I made an edit to Gridsom.js, I think, and they did approve that. So I liked it. It's a way to allow users collaborate. It's a good feeling if you eventually do it and they review it and approve it. But that code could also potentially be a point of conflict if people start sending, inaccurate information to your docs. You have to moderate it properly. All right, then, AI integration is the new thing in town. Everyone's doing it. Well, not everyone yet, but at least Supabase was the first to do it, I think. And what they did is they trained an AI agent, probably ChatGPT, with their documents. And what that meant was you could either search the docs for what you want, or you could just ask the AI. And the AI has the context of the documentation. So if you're asking, how do I do XYZ thing with Supabase, it's not sourcing that information from the whole World Wide Web. It's sourcing the information from Supabase docs. So it's kind of like an interaction. You're chatting with an agent that is telling you all you need to know about a particular thing, and it's all right there in your docs, which I think is very good. Because sometimes you just need a little bit of help to get what you want. And the other thing is, after they did it, it was really helpful. We started looking at how do we do exactly the same thing at Collabland. We haven't quite gotten there yet. We haven't done it yet. But I think after a couple of weeks, Netlify went ahead and did the same thing. Right? They added this ask me anything on the docs. So if you go to docs.netlify.com, this is likely the first thing you will see. Right? And what that meant was you could ask this AI anything you want to do about it. Netlify has like a really large docs. Like the documentation is huge. It's massive. So it will take a lot of time for you to navigate through it and find all the things you want, depending on what you want to do. But if you had this ask me anything functionality, then you could probably just ask what you want, and you don't need someone. The agent is already trained with all the context of the documentation, and it will just spit out whatever you want. So in conclusion, these are some of the things that I think if you're not doing, you should be doing to make your docs better. Make it fast. People will enjoy that. Make it clear and concise. Keep it always up to date. Make it complete and accurate so that you have all the information that you want. Something that I also did yesterday was try to cut my slides down a little bit because I had a lot of opinions, a lot of ideas. But I had like very limited time, and I wanted to make sure that I don't waste your time. So some things on the slide that I haven't talked about, but I'm happy to talk about it after the presentation. I do have like a consultancy with other companies as well, where I kind of advise on things like dev-related docs and all sorts of things. So if you want to talk to me about any of that, I just don't have enough time to cover it all. Logically structured and simple. Accessible. Accessibility is one key part about documentations. You want to make sure that you're accounting for assistive technologies and all of that, because a lot of people use screen readers. You offer examples and use cases. Make sure the docs is searchable, and this is one that I was so pained that I had to take out of my slides. But people come to your documentation and they don't have a way to search. And you would think that this is something everybody is implementing in 2023. You'll be surprised how many documentations don't have like a search bar. And if you use like tools like Algolia and the rest, you could have a search bar in 2 minutes if you set it up right. So I'm getting a lot of waves from the back. Feedback and collaboration-oriented documentations are also very helpful. Thank you very much for having me today. Have a nice one.